ownership. So, shared ownership is a government backed scheme that allows buyers to purchase a share of property. It's typically between 25 and 75% while paying rent on the portion that they don't own. So, it's shared ownership. So, you own part, you don't own part. The part you don't own, you pay rent on. It's aimed at first time buyers, offering a smaller deposit requirement and the option to increase ownership gradually through something called staircasing, which I will explain what staircasing is. While it can provide an affordable route onto the property ladder, it also comes with ongoing rent, service charges, and certain restrictions that buyers need to understand before committing. My name is Anthony Lindsay, and I've been in finance for over 30 years. And particular topics that I talk about, I'm really passionate about because as someone who worked in collections and pre litigation for over a decade, I've seen what happens when things go wrong. So, for almost 10 years, or a little bit over 10 years, I dealt with everybody that had a situation where things went wrong. So I'm really well versed in what can go wrong if people don't have the right product, so don't understand what they're getting. You make sure that you connect with me on LinkedIn. Make sure that if you do need a mortgage broker that you reach out to me, but be sure to watch this video until the end because there's some very important information. So shared ownership. I'm in a WhatsApp group, a property WhatsApp group, and this has been an ongoing topic for probably the last couple of weeks. And one of the great things about this group is that there's hundreds of people in there from different walks of life. And when the topic of shared ownership comes up, I get some people saying they love it, some people saying they hate it, and each individual will say what their experience is. So when someone comes to me and asks me, should I get a shared ownership property? I tell them to do two things. I tell them, go on Google, which will be a little bit objective in the sense that you're just searching for a term and you'll get to see a lot of things. So go to Google and search shared ownership nightmares, and you'll find all the horror stories so you can do your research. But then search why I love shared ownership. And what that will allow you to do is get a view of what people are saying, what their feelings about shared ownership are, and why. So that's always a good starting point. Let's go through an example scenario of purchasing a shared ownership property. I find that when you look at the numbers and when you do it in this way, it makes it a little bit more understandable to people and they can digest it a lot better than just talking hypothetically. So people come to me all the time and say, should I get a shared ownership property? And I tell them, look, what you want to do is Google nightmares and then Google I love my shared ownership to get a view of what can go wrong, but also understand the numbers. This is key. So let's go through this scenario. So let's just say it's a property value of 300,000. You're looking to buy 50%. So 50% of 300 is 150. So you only need to get the mortgage on 50%, which is 150,000. So your deposit is 15,000. So that's 10% of the 150 because you're only buying 50%, remember. And then the mortgage required is 135. So you get that number by saying, well, it's 150 for the share, the 50% share, but then you're paying down 15,000. So 150 minus 15 is 135. The thing that you have to remember is that you're getting the mortgage, you're paying the deposit, but as far as your monthly payments, you'll need to pay rent on the other 50% that you don't own. In this example, the rent plus the service charge could range between 400 and 600. So on a 135 pound mortgage, depending on your age, let's just say you're paying 900 pounds a month, you'd be paying the 900 pound mortgage plus the rent and service charge. And depending on the housing association and the type of property, service charges typically cover communal maintenance, insurance, and building management. Service charges can be really tricky, they can be really sticky, and they can be a deal breaker for a lot of people, especially now. When you do Google the pros and cons of shared ownership, you will probably find that the people that were dissatisfied with their shared ownership purchase, it usually either comes down to leasehold, or it comes down to service charges. So that means the monthly cost that you're going to be paying is your mortgage plus your rent plus the service charge. In many cases, the total can end up similar to renting privately. Keeping in mind, if you're renting privately, you don't have the headache of maintenance and all these other things because the landlord takes care of everything. But with the important difference that the portion of your payments is going towards building equity in your share of the home. Over time, you may choose to increase your share and go through staircasing, which we discussed, which reduces the rent element and increases your ownership stake. So in this scenario, you found a property for 300,000, you're buying 50% share, which is 150,000. You've come up with a 10% deposit, which is 15,000. You've got a mortgage of 135,000 pounds. You're paying the mortgage, plus you're paying the rent plus service charges. So it can sometimes work out to be the same cost as renting, but you do have the peace of mind of saying, well, you know what? I own 50% of this and it's building equity. But the downside to that is that you might be paying what you'd be paying if you were renting. And at least when you're renting, there's not as many ties, and you, to a degree, you have a little bit more freedom. So that's a scenario of what the numbers look like for a shared ownership purchase. Who's eligible for a shared ownership? Shared ownership is not a property empire building scheme. It is designed to help people who are on lower incomes. So your household income must be under 80,000 or less, 80,000 or less, or 90,000 or less in London. So you can't be a high earner. This is not designed for people who have other options. This is kind of like a last option for many people. So your current ownership, you must not already own another property, because if you already own another property, this is not for you. This is designed to help people get on the property ladder. And that includes in the UK or abroad. So you cannot own another property in the UK or abroad. If you do, you need to be in the process of selling it. So this cannot be a second property for you. And this is a thing to keep in mind. So if you are someone that's like, ooh, I'm going to build a property empire by going into shared ownership, this is not for you. You won't qualify. It's for first time buyers who can't afford to buy outright. So, as I said, the shared ownership scheme is really to help people who maybe can't come up with the big deposit or don't have the affordability for a larger mortgage amount, but they want the peace of mind of knowing that they're paying into something that is building equity. So, this is some of the criteria on who is eligible. Other criteria includes previous homeowners who can't afford to buy again after a change in circumstances, so divorce or financial setbacks. I would say that the divorce situation is probably one of the top reasons why someone might end up getting a shared ownership property. So you have a couple, they separate, the marital assets are divided. So now one of the people have to now find a new home. They maybe got some equity out of the home, the marital home. They have some money, but it's not enough to buy a similar home. So they do have a little bit of money for the deposit, and they do have the affordability. They do have good credit, but it's just not enough to get them a similar home to the one that they were living in. So shared ownership might be a good fit for them. The other people are existing shared owners looking to move into another shared ownership property. You will need good credit. I will say that the credit issue is one of those things that can be a stumbling block for people that are looking to get shared ownership. And the other thing is, if you have any complex situations or complex pay structures, or you don't have a UK passport, anything that would add additional complexity to your situation may rule you out for the shared ownership. And the reason is, we even as a broker, I work with a lot of lenders. But keep in mind, not every lender does shared ownership. So right away, you're losing a lot of lenders. And then if you have complexities like you're a contractor who's paid through an umbrella company and doesn't have a UK passport, you're ruling out lots more lenders. So this product is more designed for people with the UK passport, good credit, and people who are financially sound and have affordability, but just can't afford to get a bigger property all in one go. So this gives them the opportunity to get the property they want by buying a share and then in time staircasing up. A requirement may be local connection. So some developers are trying to do the shared ownership scheme to help key workers. So if you're a nurse, a police officer, a teacher, people like that, it's to help them get on the property ladder because they're very vital to society, but quite often cannot afford to buy their first home. So this is just some of the criteria for shared ownership. There is other criteria, and criteria changes. So make sure that when you find the property, you ask the questions and do the preliminary criteria check to make sure that you do qualify for a shared ownership property before you start talking about mortgages. So let's go through the pros of shared ownership. When you watch my videos, you know I like to give a balanced, objective view with context. I like to give the pros and the cons. I'll start with the pros because I always like to end on the downside because I'm not trying to sell you anything. So the pros of shared ownership. So a lower deposit, we've talked about that. Because you're not buying 100% of the property, you only need a portion of the mortgage. Therefore, you need a lower deposit. So a lower deposit is one of the pros. It's a more affordable route onto the property ladder. Again, because you're not buying the full property outright initially, you do have the option to staircase up, but you're starting with a smaller percentage, something that's affordable, something that meets your budget. You have an ability to staircase to own 100%. Although this is a pro, make sure that you read the documents because not every housing association will allow you to go up to 100% when you staircase. And this tends to be one of the complaints that people might have if they find that staircasing wasn't a good fit for them or they're unhappy with it. Security of own home ownership versus renting. So some people just like the peace of mind of saying, you know what, I could rent, and every month the money that I pay for my rent is going to somebody else. It's going to a landlord. By doing this, although 100% isn't going towards building equity in my own property, at least I know some of it is, and I have the hope and I have the option of some time in the future owning 100% of this property. And you can sell your share at market value. So if you decide that you no longer want to have this property, you can sell it. But as I said, the housing association has first right of refusal, and they do need to be involved with that sale. So you can't just go and find anyone and sell the share to. So the pros, there are some great advantages to shared ownership. And I know people that love shared ownership. They've started at 50% or 75%, and they've staircased up and now own the full property. And this was the beginning of a property portfolio for them, or just finding their forever home. So there's some upsides to shared ownership, and you should consider it if you meet the criteria and it's your only option. But make sure that you speak to a mortgage broker, make sure that you understand the housing association guidelines. I always like to explain the downside to things. As I said, there are upsides to shared ownership, but there are a lot of downsides if you do not find the right housing association and if this product just isn't for you and you haven't thought it out. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to just talk you through the cons, the downsides of shared ownership, that you can make an informed choice before you move into getting a mortgage or even looking for a shared ownership, because you may look at the downsides or the cons and say it's not something that's right for me. So first and foremost, you're still paying rent. So you are still paying rent on the portion that you don't own. So even though you own part of the property, you'll still be paying rent on the portion owned by the housing association. This rent is reviewed annually and usually, like with everything in life, increases. And So your monthly costs may go up over time. So if you're someone that has a very tight budget and you like to know how much you're paying each month for the next 5 years, you're not going to get that from shared ownership because the rent is reviewed and usually does go up. Service charges and maintenance costs. This is a big one that people don't factor in, especially when they're looking at shared ownership as a quick way on the property ladder that is cheap. So, most shared ownership properties are leasehold, which is problematic in and of itself, which means you'll pay service charges for building and upkeep, communal areas, and sometimes even ground rent. These costs can be significant and are outside of your control. So, you have no say. So, one of the complaints that I see quite regularly about shared ownership is the fact that I have all of the responsibility of fixing everything. So, I can't go to the housing association and say, oh, I need a new boiler. It's £1,000. Give me £500. No, you're paying that full £1,000. So you have the full responsibility of these maintenance and upkeep. Any equity that you build in that property, they get a share of that, but you have to pay for everything. So service charges can be a deal breaker for a lot of people. Restrictions on selling, another big thing that you need to think about, and why I discourage some people who aren't looking for a forever home from shared ownership. When you want to move, you can't always just sell on the open market. In most cases, the housing association has the right of refusal, meaning they get the chance to find a buyer for your share before you do. This can slow down the selling process. In my opinion, shared ownership is not suitable if you're not looking for your forever home. Shared ownership can be a great product if you're looking for your forever home. So somewhere that you plan on staying in and, unfortunately dying in. But it's great if you plan on buying it at an amount that's affordable to you now. So buying a share that's affordable and then staircasing up to 100% and then living there. If you are someone that is a young professional where you may get a job offer up north or down south or out of the country, this may not be the product for you because of the restrictions on selling. So it makes it less flexible. And also, there will be guidelines about subletting and different things because the housing association has a lot of say on what happens with the property. So, those are some of the cons or the downsides to shared ownership. It's a product that isn't for everybody, but for some people, it's amazing. I just wanted to cover off some of the downsides. More of the cons of shared ownership. Staircasing can be expensive. While staircasing lets you increase your share, each step requires evaluation, solicitor's fees, and sometimes higher mortgage costs. These extra expenses can make it more costly than buyers initially expect. So, every time you staircase up, so every time you buy additional shares, you have to go through that mortgage process of valuation, solicitor, and these things cost money. So, unless you're someone who maybe is starting at 75% and then is only going to staircase up once by buying the additional 25%, if you're planning on doing it over, several steps up, or you haven't thought it through, really do consider the costs. The other thing is the leasehold rules. We've talked about that. As with many leasehold properties, there can be restrictions such as needing permission for alterations, limits on subletting, and possible ground rent. These can feel restrictive compared to owning a freehold home. So, with a freehold home, you do what you want. With a leasehold, you need permission to do most major things in the home. And when you do those things, you pay the full price yourself. But then, if it adds value to the property, that increased value is then shared with the housing association. It's not always cheaper in the long term. At first glance, shared ownership can seem more affordable because of the lower deposit. But once you factor in the rent, the service charge, and rising costs, it isn't always cheaper than renting or buying outright in the long run. So, overall, when you look at all the cons, do the math, think it through, and decide if it is actually the best way on the property ladder for you, or does it just make sense to wait a little bit longer, get a bigger deposit, or maybe wait until you move to that next career jump with a salary, or maybe you just buy a less expensive home. If you're in London, instead of looking in zone 2, maybe you're looking in zone 3 or 4. You need to consider this because shared ownership is not right for everybody, but for some people it's perfect. These are some of the cons of shared ownership. The key takeaways. Now, hopefully you've watched all of this video and you've understood that there are pros and there are cons to shared ownership. It's an amazing product for some people, and for others, avoid it at all costs. So here are the key takeaways. Shared ownership can be a good option for first-time buyers who have smaller deposits and limited affordability. So the key takeaway in that is maybe you just need to save a little bit longer to get to that point where you can buy a home outright. It allows you to get on the property ladder sooner and gradually increase ownership over time. That process is called staircasing. Staircasing is possible. Make sure you read your contract because some housing associations don't allow you to staircase to 100%, and staircasing can be costly and it's definitely time consuming. Success with shared ownership depends on careful planning. Look at your deposit, future staircasing options, and whether the monthly costs fit your long-term budget. And by your long-term budget, I would say your 5 to 7 year horizon. Don't just think short term. Don't just be so eager to get on the property ladder that you do the wrong thing. So those are some of the key takeaways of the consideration of, is shared ownership the right product for you? So what could go wrong? What could go wrong with shared ownership? So let's just go through some of the things that could go wrong with shared ownership. In my experience, the people who love shared ownership are people who have thought it through. They've thought about the budget. They found a good housing association. They know their long-term plan, and they read and listen to their mortgage broker. If you don't read, if you don't listen to your mortgage broker, you put yourself in a situation where you could end up getting the wrong product. So let's just look at what could go wrong with shared ownership. Service charges and rent may rise over time, making the property less affordable than you originally thought. And that would probably be the number one reason why people complain about shared ownership. Staircasing can be expensive with the fees each time you increase your share. So each time you increase your share, as I said, you're going to pay valuation fees and possibly broker fees and legal fees, et cetera, et cetera. So each time you staircase up, not only will you need some money to staircase up, but you also need to make sure you match the affordability for that increased mortgage amount. Restrictions on resale could limit your flexibility when you want to move. So as I said, if you're an upwardly mobile professional who, is considering moving abroad or moving to another part of the country, you're losing flexibility. This may not be the product for you. If your circumstances change, as I said, due to job loss or relationship breakdown, the combined cost of the mortgage, rent, and charges may put a financial pressure on you. So when you're entering into this, don't just think about best case scenario. You also have to think about worst case scenario. So those are some of the things that could go wrong. Once you find a shared ownership property, you're going to need a broker. As I said, the estate agent or the housing association quite often will introduce you to their broker. On the one hand, it's good because they probably deal with shared ownership every day, and not every mortgage broker does. And some mortgage brokers avoid shared ownership like the plague. But if you have found a shared ownership property and you'd like to understand how much you can get, what the payments are, and you want to also understand what it means for you and what the possible alternatives might be, make sure you give me a call. It's not going to cost you anything. I do a free mortgage capacity report. I'll talk you through the shared ownership product, but I'll also tell you what you might be able to get just as an outright purchase. And I'll give you the tools that you need to make an informed choice. It's a free mortgage capacity report. There's no broker fees, no fees unless I actually do something for you. So the process would be I'd find you the mortgage, make sure you qualify, get you the agreement in principle, then complete the full mortgage application. There is an application fee after I've done all the work. Once I get you the mortgage offer, so that's when the lender has said, yep, we will lend to you on this specific shared ownership property. That's when I charge my broker fee. But the conversation is free, and you should always seek professional advice. I'll support you through the entire process. I'm fast, I'm reliable, and I'm someone that you can get in touch with. I'm not just some guy on YouTube. Increase your financial literacy. As I said, most of the time, people complain about shared ownership and other mortgages because they didn't listen, they didn't understand, but usually that's because they felt uncomfortable asking certain questions. I've written a book called A Mortgage is a Really Big Loan. It explains mortgages, but so much more. It talks about estate planning and wills. It talks about basic finance. It talks about credit. It's a great gift for anyone who wants to get better financial literacy. It's great for young adults who are just starting their careers. And it's also good for people who have recently moved to the UK who just want to understand how finance in the UK works. If you're getting a mortgage, if you're planning on building a financial future, it's a great book. It's available on Amazon. I'd really appreciate your support. You can buy it for yourself or you can buy it as a gift. My name is Anthony Lindsay, and I make these videos to share information. It's not to replace speaking to a qualified professional. It's not legal advice, it's not tax advice, and it's not financial advice. It's just talking through products that people ask me about. Today, we've been talking about shared ownership. Shared ownership, in my opinion, is great for some people. I have people that swear by it. I have people in my WhatsApp group that tell everyone you should consider shared ownership because they've had a good experience. From what I've seen, those are the people that tend to be very detail oriented. They ask questions, they read, they understand, they have good credit. They are looking for their forever home, not for just something to build a property portfolio. And they are willing to listen to their broker. On the other hand, I have people that contact me about shared ownership and I say, do not do it. These tend to be people that are looking for a cheap win, something that's quick and easy. Shared ownership is not quick, it's not easy, and it's not for everybody. So make sure you do your due diligence. I would advise you to seek independent legal advice if you're considering a shared ownership purchase, and be very careful about the housing association guidelines. In my experience, most of the complaints stem from either the leasehold side of things, from the maintenance and service charges, or from the housing association guidelines. So always do your due diligence, not just with shared ownership, but with any mortgage. Please only work with a mortgage broker that you trust, that you know, that is honest and will tell you and give you the advice that you need. Sometimes it won't be the information that you want, and they might not tell you what you want to hear, but a good mortgage broker will always tell you the best way of handling things. My name is Anthony Lindsay, and I make these videos to inform and educate. If you know anyone that's looking to purchase a home, remortgage, do a bridging loan, or anything that is mortgage or equity release related, please share this video. If you've watched this video, even for a minute or two, make sure you subscribe to the channel because that will tell YouTube that the information I'm putting out is valuable. If you've heard something that you don't understand, please put it in the comments. If there's a topic or a product related to mortgages that you'd like for me to talk about, please put that in the comments too. But make sure you like, make sure you share, and make sure you subscribe.